Okay, some scenes on scraps. These are some unconventional sizes of papers because they are scrap pieces from various projects over the last, well, I'm guessing year and a half or so. This first little scene here, it's about, I don't know, it's about the size of like a small dollar bill or something like that. And what I'm doing is I'm using the Gold Brilliance ink, which is a pigment ink. It's a fast-drying water-based pigment ink that will dry on non-porous surfaces, and just a traditional piece of gold foil, okay? You will have to spray seal this type of ink to really adhere it to the surface, where it will air dry or be heat set, you know, if you want to dry it faster. You will need to spray seal when complete. Okay, so something like a Krylon, crystal clear, something of that sort. Okay, stamping it all in gold. The quote is in white though, okay? Just going for a little bit of a, kind of a contrast change and a, you know, in an addition to just the straight gold monochromatic, the white really comes in handy. And to match that white, I'm spraying with a kind of a splatter paint application of some opaque white watercolor paint with the Dr. Martens Bleed Proof White. Going in here and adding a focal point in the scene with a white acrylic paint pen. It's the 0.7mm extra fine tip. And that little star kind of adds a nice little focal point to the scene. And again, it reiterates the white of the quote and snowfall. Okay, now this one is a really narrow piece of a very dark blue cardstock, glossy cardstock that is, okay? That's kind of hard to find these days, so if you want to do something like this, you can use a black glossy cardstock, and that's that color is always available out there. Okay, using mostly the winter scenes in here. That is the snowy bank, and that is the deer silhouette. And going up top with a ripped paper towel, kind of a cloud template, just hand ripped, and adding the top portion for this very narrow, kind of more bookmark kind of formatted scene. In fact, this will probably be a bookmark when complete, after I mat it up and, I don't know, kind of frame it off. But I'm adding in these layers of clouds up top. And one of the things is, from a textural standpoint, that really doesn't match the bottom portion. The top portion is so soft, so you'll see what I do to remedy this kind of textural discrepancy later on in the creation of this piece. I'm kind of making it up as I go along here, so I'm just kind of addressing what I see visually happening in here. So here is something where I go in and I add in a softer, kind of element to this lower section. The white is still a little bit wet, you know, in terms of the impression, so I'm being fairly delicate as far as my application of this pigment ink down there, okay? I might have even heat set it. I can't remember at this point in time. In fact, I think I did heat set that white. But it will rub off if you kind of apply it too heavily. And again, this one is one where I will heat set it. Okay, I was going to put a quote up there, but I thought, you know, a moon would look kind of interesting up there. So I'm going to add this full moon. You're saying, well, what do you mean a full moon? Well, I'm stamping out these images in white instead of on black, and I'm using a dark paper instead of white. So what we're doing here is I just stamped out a reverse impression of the glowing orb stamp that has this little moon on there, and then I fill it in, again, with the extra fine acrylic paint pen. All right, now after that moon has been added, I'm going in here and adding the clouds underneath the moon. So these clouds underneath the moon are being top lit. The clouds above the moon are being bottom lit. Okay, so you just change the angle of your cloud template. Okay, now that moon was looking a little bit too sharp in there for that really soft lighting that was indicative of the cloud type of lighting. So what I'm doing is I'm making that moon glow a little bit by adding some pigment ink right over the top of the moon, and here I am kind of adding some brighter or lighter highlights into my clouds, okay? And that makes it look like it's, I know certain areas of the clouds are being illuminated by the moonlight, a little bit more so than other areas of the clouds. It makes them look more three-dimensional this way. Okay, adding in a few more clouds underneath there. And as I move away from the clouds, I'm making these applications of the white pigment ink a little bit lighter so that they are darker, so it transitions from really brightly lit clouds around my light source to more dimly lit clouds the farther away from the light source, okay? I do kind of lighten it up, you know, as I get down towards the, you know, the deer and things like that, you know, a little bit too, just to balance things off a little bit more. But for the most part, it goes from light to dark as you move away from that moon. And again, with the splatter painted Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. And here I am going into the scene, and I'm doing a little bit of illumination, again, with that white paint pen. Adding some to the deer's back. Adding in some highlights on tops of some of those clouds, underneath some of those clouds, closer to where the moonlight would be reflecting off of them. Going into the terrain and illuminating some of the rocks and some of the little details that are within that lower foundational area. And then there's some of the winter twigs in there, and I'm illuminating some of these branches, making them look a little bit more three-dimensional, because the white acrylic paint pen is whiter than the applications of the white pigment ink with either the cotton ball or the impressions made. And that's kind of roughly how I'll mat it off after it dries and after I spray seal it. Okay, black on Stardream. I haven't done this type of technique in a little while, but I've done it many times over the years, but I haven't done it for quite a bit of time, so I thought I would do that. And what I like on this Stardream paper, the ink doesn't adhere to it very well, because it's coated in, I don't know, whatever Stardream is coated in to give it that shimmery, iridescent surface, okay? So when you apply ink on there, it doesn't adhere to it very well, which in some ways can be bad, but if you use it to your advantage, you can really go for these really soft applications of ink in the background, and I think it gives it kind of a windy type of look, especially on this color. Now there's my black ink on the Stardream. I should have re-inked it, my black dye-based pad, but you know, if I get an impression like that, it just makes it look like the trees are in like a bank of fog or something like that, so a little bit lighter, and it's kind of conducive for the overall look of the piece. You know, I want it to look like, I don't know, the trees in this kind of situation are a little bit of a, oh, like a snowstorm or something like that, like a real blustery day with that kind of arcing glow that I've created in the background. Now here I've kind of re-inked my re-inker, and this tree right here stamps out fairly dark. I probably should have put a couple more impressions in with the same tree, just in darker versions to give it a little bit more depth, but I just go ahead and spray splatter paint the background, giving this scene a lot of snow. You can't really see it too well because the scene in general is fairly light, so you have splatter painted white against a very light background. So unlike the dark glossy cardstock that I used previously on the scene right before this one, the white doesn't stand out so much, so I do add a pretty good amount of it down. It's really splattered. And if you hold up the original, you can see all of those little beads of white, you know, splatter painted all over it. Okay, now I'm going in with the paintbrush, and with the same Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, I'm adding the snow on the branches of these trees, okay? And you don't have to be real careful about it. It looks kind of even better to have it a little bit more varied and I don't know, kind of blotchy in some areas as far as the snow goes. Adding in a little bit of extra black and white ink into the scene, okay, giving it a little bit of a foggier look. Okay, now doing that black on the Stardream, black on light, I wanted to see what this kind of approach to white on black would look like. Now this is just a piece of black matte cardstock, so I haven't really done this before that I can remember, so I thought I would give it a try, and I'll show you what we end up with this piece. I'm not sure if the theme, you know, was appropriate for this piece. I thought it looked like it could be a really cool, kind of a haunted scene or something for Halloween. If I had different imagery and I was using something like tombstones or something like that, spooky trees in the background. But on this one, I just used the same pine trees, you know, just to keep things simple and, you know, as far as an experiment goes. But adding the white in that kind of wispier look, and then kind of blending in that white a little bit more by going over it with some black Brilliance ink. Okay, so I went with the white, then we're going in with the black again. I got a little splotchy in some areas with the white, so the black is just going in and, you know, kind of evening that out, blending it out. Okay, now again, this black isn't stamping too dark on here, so what I did was I switched up with the Brilliance black ink, and I re-inked my pad, giving these trees not too dark of an impression because it is a matte paper, but it's giving me a little bit of a darker impression than the first impression. So re-ink your pads if you're going to be doing this technique, and that's what I would recommend. Okay, going on with the spruce tree, the larger version. And this is, I thought, okay, it's kind of adding some depth to the scene. I wasn't quite sure if this was going to be a workable scene right here, the way the images were stamping out so light. Okay, now I'm going in here with the leafless pine. And I thought, okay, now this leafless pine really stands out from the background really nicely. So I thought we achieved a pretty decent amount of depth just by using different applications of trees within that space. I thought, you know, not too bad for just all black ink. Okay, going on with the white paint pen. I didn't want to splatter paint anything in there. And here, just like that gold scene in the beginning, I'm adding a little 8-point star. Actually, this one's fairly large because it's such a long piece of paper. I thought I would go for this fairly large star, and plus we needed a focal point in here, as the trees don't really stand out very well, you know, black against, you know, almost like a dark gray or something like that. So I thought that star looked pretty good, so I added 2 more, one dominant one and 2, I don't know, kind of subservient ones as far as visuals go. And there you have it. A little experiment. I think I can apply some of these techniques on a scene going forward, but adding a little bit more texture and lighting with some highlights on the trees here. This scene is about subtlety. Okay, and there you have it. 4 different scenes, kind of elongated ones, kind of more bookmarky types, you know. I don't know, some of these, 2 of them are horizontal, so I don't know if they're bookmarks, but they're fun to do, and I recommend giving them a try.